أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. The most noble of you are those who have the most consciousness of their Creator. So as we try to build these bridges within our community, let's have the foundation of taqwa. That's what makes us differentiate between one another. Who's most conscious of their duty to their Creator? Nothing else. That is what makes us different from one another in levels of greatness, and levels of akram. Nobility is taqwa, is your consciousness and your level of consciousness and your fear of your Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in order to explain the connections within our communities and amongst brothers and sisters, I've invited a special guest. A special guest for me, but really a special guest for us all. This brother, and I'm privileged to be able to call him a brother, because truly he's a scholar of our time, if you ask me. And that word, I understand, gets tossed out there loosely. But when I read to you some of this brother's accomplishments, I had to write it down because I know a lot about him, but I didn't know all this. It might take me a few minutes to get through some of this. And to have a person like that amongst us to be able to deliver us some words of reflection, alhamdulillah, we're grateful for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow him to be amongst us tonight. This brother, mashallah, was, as some of you young people see me, he was that to me when I was young. And even more. When I was young, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, on the corner of Fulton and Bedford. Masjid al-Taqwa. Some of you may know, some of you don't know. But if you don't know, you're going to find out right now. Masjid al-Taqwa is one of the pillars of Islam in America. It's one of the masjids that helped to establish this deen in America. And the imam of that masjid, most of you know him, Imam Siraj Wahaj. You ever heard of Imam Siraj Wahaj? Look him up if you haven't heard of him. He's the imam of that masjid. And now when I was growing up, there was a young imam that had a lot of spirit, a lot of heart. He used to come deliver khutbah. That used to resonate with the young people there. And he used to get us fired up. And every time he would give the khutbah, we made sure that we was there because this imam right here, he was different. This imam took his shahada when he was a teenager. He wasn't even born into Islam. Well, we were all born as Muslims, but his situation, his circumstances, whether his parents or anything else, took him another course in life. But he reverted to the deen of Islam when he was a teenager. And he sought out to study Islam by going to Mecca on his own when he was a teenager, on his own. And he overstood his faith. Like he was there, low-key, he was, I hope you don't mind me saying, I've heard him say it before, so I can say it. He was there illegally for some time, in Mecca, just camping out, trying to study. Imagine as a 15, 16-year-old, just camping out in Mecca, trying to get knowledge. Eventually graduating from the University of Mecca, he went on to graduate from the State University of New York in Binghamton and studied in Classical Arabic Studies Department. He's the founder and originator of Islam on Capitol Hill and delivered the Jumu'ah khutbah on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. to over 10,000 Muslims. He delivered the khutbah in the United Nations for more than 5 years, speaking to the heads of state and the international staff from more than 50 countries. After 9/11, he was part of the clergy who assisted the New York City Police Department providing counseling and spiritual guidance to those who lost family members. Imam Abdullah has spoken in various interfaith dialogues in churches, synagogues, mosques throughout the whole country. He has been a previous guest speaker for ISNA and ICNA. Imam Abdullah has lectured at the University of Chicago, at Harvard University, at Princeton University, at Columbia University, at the New York Law School, Long Island University, and many other higher education institutions throughout the United States and Canada. He is currently the president of NYC Family Day, Inc., hosting and developing events including the Jumu'ah prayer on Capitol Hill, the banquet at the Rayburn Center of Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., the first Ramadan Iftar banquet at the United Nations headquarters in New York City, and the tribute to Muhammad Ali at the United Nations headquarters in New York City. Now, if that isn't a bio that deserves some respect, I don't know what is. This brother has put in work in the Muslim community since I was a kid. That was a long time ago. And he's been putting in work ever since. He recently moved here to DFW, and I'm honored and humbled to invite up one of my mentors, Imam Abdullah. Please come up, Imam. Jazakumullah khair.
Takbir!
Excuse me. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. My dua is that of Musa alayhi salam. When he was given the task to communicate with Fir'aun, he asked Allah to expand for him his chest, to ease for him his task, to untie the knot from his tongue, so that people could understand the words that were coming out of his mouth. We seek refuge with Allah from misguiding and being misguided, from betraying and being betrayed into ignorance by others. We ask that Allah guide our hearts and that He guide our tongues. Alhamdulillah, we have a giant amongst us, and I'm going to give him the floor here to quickly, you got to go a little bit more in depth about that story, because I need everybody to understand the magnitude of not only reverting into Islam, but then going over to Mecca, Saudi Arabia, this must have been, I would assume this is like in the 90s or early 2000s. It was in the 80s. Brother, look young, don't you? I just assumed. MashaAllah, what was that experience like, Imam? Could you just like break the ice for us and let us understand what that experience like, you entering Islam and then going to Mecca?
Inshallah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala ashraf al-Salim, Sayyidina wa Habibina Muhammadin, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful. We bear witness that nothing should be worshipped except Allah, and we bear witness that Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, is indeed Allah's messenger. He is the seal of all prophets. He is the embodiment of the perfect example of what it means to be a true worshipper of Allah. And Aisha, she said, كَانَ خُلُقُهُ al-Qur'an. She said the Prophet ﷺ is the essence of his character was the Quran. So when I was probably, come here, the brother with the glasses, come. Exactly. I was a little, come. How old are you? You're 11. I was a little taller than him, about the same weight. How much you weigh? I probably was 90, and I'm probably 200 now. Okay, you can sit down. So, just to give you, I'll make it very brief. You know, I became a Muslim because of peer pressure at the age of 14. And once I embraced Islam, one of the greatest things happened for me is I had good teachers. His father, Sheikh Rashid, was one of those people. Sheikh Muharif was another teacher, Sheikh Amin Akhir, and Muhammad Abdul Hadi. These were all people that inspired me to seek knowledge. They said, if you want to be successful being a Muslim, you must become a student of knowledge. That there's no other way. If you want to be successful as a Muslim, you have to learn your Islam, learn the Quran, learn the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So after studying for 1 year in America, the Arabic language, and taking fit classes in one of the local masajids, Masjid Dawood, which is probably over 90 years old right now, one of my teachers, he said to me, you are a very young student. You can go overseas, any place, and go study Islam. He said, go. You can come back, and technology will evolve. Because some people said, don't go. If you study Islam, you're going to be poor. You better study technology. So I listened to my teacher, and I went with a delegation to Mecca. And after Hajj was over, we were in Medina. I did something that, if you ask me why I did it now, I can't explain to you because my daughter asked me a question. She said, when you were in Medina, were you not afraid to go back to Mecca by yourself? I told my daughter, you don't need courage, or you don't need courage unless you're afraid. You don't need to be courageous unless you fear something. So as a kid, I didn't know the world was a dangerous place. I had no idea of what goes on in the adult world. So I left Medina hotel. I found my way to the bus station in Mecca. And at that bus station, I bought a ticket all the way back to Mecca. Where I'm gonna stay, I never thought about it. How I was gonna eat, I never thought about it. Not knowing Arabic, never crossed my mind. I went back to the Haram, and I lived in the Haram. The Haram is open 24 hours.
What was your age?
I was probably 15 then.
15.
So, and you go to the Haram, people make them tawaf all night, but every night in the Haram, they have a cleaning crew. They clean the whole Haram, and they used to roll up the rugs. So they roll up the rugs, they put them in different corners. I would sleep in between the rugs, so that they don't wake me up and disturb my sleep until they make the adhan for Qiyam al-Layl. So every day in the Haram in Mecca, they make 2 adhans. They make the adhan for Qiyam al-Layl, and they make the adhan for Fajr. So on the first adhan, we get up, make wudu. But I lived in Mecca at that moment in the Haram. No friends. I didn't have $500 in my pocket. I didn't speak Arabic, and I didn't know anybody. And by the way, I must tell you this. I never even knew I was homeless. Wallahi, I didn't know I was homeless. Because I was a guest of Allah. I was in the Haram. And the Haram right now is about it can hold 1.2 million people inside. So even before that, it can hold hundreds of thousands of people. So I never thought one moment that I was homeless. I was never afraid. And I never thought for one moment that anything would happen to me. And it was that journey that changed my life. And my son just came back from Mecca. And it's a beautiful thing when you have children, after being a child in Mecca, to have your own children now, and my grandchildren, living in the kingdom and traveling up and down to Mecca and Medina. It's unbelievable. But it's all ni'mah, you know? It's not anything I did. I wasn't a genius. I didn't have a plan. I had no plan. But there's one thing I want to tell you I had, and this is what I hope that you have. The power of faith is greater than the power of knowledge. There are people who know, but they have no iman. So their knowledge doesn't work for them. Your faith can take you where knowledge has never been. I truly believed in Allah, and my heart was pure, and I connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before I get involved in the adult world and masjid politics and so the confusion. But as a kid in the Haram, when I worshiped Allah from the depth of my heart, when I was at the door, the golden door, at the Kaaba, my du'as was sincere. For one thing, I asked Allah to let me stay and let me study. And I was able to stay, and I was able to study, and I was able to graduate. By Allah's grace.
Inshallah. Takbir.
Allahu Akbar.
That's truly an amazing and inspiring story. What intrigues me most and kind of connects to this lecture series titled The Connections. One of the foundational ayahs of Quran that we are reflecting upon in this lecture series is يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَقُولُوا قَوْلًا سَدِيدًا. O you who believe, fear Allah and speak words of appropriate justice. Now that is a very vague statement at surface level. Words of appropriate justice, what does that mean? What I really want to dig into is when you were 14 years old and somebody communicated the words of Islam to you, one of the forms of appropriate justice that we discussed last series, or last session, was qawlan ma'rufa, words that are easy to understand, non-ambiguous, and also kind. What type of understanding did somebody provide to you through communication as a 14-year-old that made you accept Islam? What was it? Because we have some people, I'm sure, some 14s, 15s, and teenagers here. What was communicated with you specifically that led you to accept Islam?
Actually, I didn't accept Islam because I understood anything. I wanted the brother to be quiet. He kept asking me to accept Islam, be Muslim, and telling me it's haram to go to parties, it's haram to have a girlfriend, you can't smoke, you can't party, you can't wear gold, you can't wear this. I just wanted this brother to be quiet, so I said, okay, I'll be a Muslim. That's it. I never understood what he had to say, but I'll tell you the root of my guidance. The Quran says, كَذَلِكَ يُضِلُّ اللَّهُ مَن يَشَاءُ وَيَهْدِي مَن يَشَاءُ. It is Allah who guides whom He pleases, and He allows to go astray whomsoever He will. So the brother who gave me Shahada, I actually forgot who he was. It was 10 years or 15 years later, someone said to me, hey, the person who talked to you about Islam was Imam Ayub. I never knew it was Imam Ayub. I just knew it was a brother. He kept talking, and I was like, okay, this guy needs to be quiet. What do I need to do? Become Muslim? Okay, I'm Muslim. And then they said, oh, you have to go upstairs, it's prayer time. That's when I thought the Muslims were crazy. They made the adhan, and I saw them put their face on the floor. I said, these people are absolutely crazy. So I didn't understand anything. I want to tell you this. If you ever give da'wah to someone, do not think it's you being clever and you having argumentative and having proof to convince people. If you get into the business of thinking you are the winner of souls, you will lose your soul. When Allah wants to guide someone, He doesn't need eloquence. Musa, in the Holy Quran, he said, send my brother, who afsah minni lisan. Send my brother, he is more eloquent in the language. Allah, you don't need eloquence. What Allah uses, He uses human beings as vessels. But Allah Ta'ala is the one to give the Hidayah. Even if you're born in a Muslim family, it means nothing. If you don't accept the truth of Islam in your hearts, and you don't build a connection and a relationship with Allah, it means nothing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to touch your heart. This deen is a spiritual component. You can read all the books, you can memorize Quran, you can memorize Hadith, all of that can be in vain. I see all kids in the Muslim community reading Quran, rocking back and forth. I ask them one question. What does Alhamdulillah Rabbil mean? They say, I don't know. How long you been memorizing the Quran like that? 7 years. Why somebody waste a kid's life 7 years when they could have taught him what the Quran means in Arabic for those 7 years? It's not hard to learn the Arabic language. I started my Arabic course in America, in Brooklyn, in the ghetto, with the teacher who was an American, once a week, every Sunday for 2 hours. He taught me free of charge, and he was one of the most beautiful Muslim brothers I ever met in my life. And never to this day, wallahi, to this day, he never says to anyone, I taught Abdullah. He never says that. But I'm telling you, he is. His name is Muhammad Abdul Hadi. He's a very humble man. He had a lot of taqwa. And he avoided backbiting and slandering. He told me when we used to get in the car and we go to the Islamic fit class, he said, brother, when we're driving, if you want to talk, it's fine. But make sure what you talk is good. I don't want to be slandering, backbiting, none of that. He taught me that as a young boy. So when I'm in Mecca, or when I became Muslim, you know, it's a crazy story. I'm writing about it. I have 400 pages, but it's going to be condensed, inshallah. But I want to tell you this quickly. When I go home, my brother is Muslim before me. But when I go home, my brother wakes me up in the morning for Fajr. And I'm thinking, what kind of God you talking to? Like, does God not sleep? You know what time it is? He tells me, get up. We make wudu. We went up my mother's toilet bowl, the bathroom. She thought we was urinating everywhere. No, she didn't. You know, the Muslims right now, there's some hotels, Muslims are barred from in New Jersey. You know why? They make wudu and they splash water everywhere. Because we don't practice the sunnah. If you use the restroom, especially in hotels, convention centers, we should allocate someone there with the broom, the mop, and a spongy. Clean it up. Because if someone falls in these hotels, they want to sue. So I go back to my main point. When I became a Muslim, it wasn't because I understood the message. There was nothing to understand. I needed this brother to be quiet, period. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had a different plan. Allah used him to bring me. And by the way, this brother was the principal. His name is Muslim. He passed away. May Allah have mercy on him. Say Ameen.
Ameen.
Brother Muslim was in charge of a school. I was put in that school because they said I was a bad kid. This is what I got to tell you. I was sent to a school for bad children. They conned me. They told me in the public school, if you leave this school, we give you $75 a week. I was like, yes, I'm out. The school they sent me to, mashallah, it was in a warehouse building. very organized, very clean, and only 15 kids in the classroom. They took all the bad kids out and they put us there. But this place was organized, the teachers were loving, there was discipline, there was great academia, and it was that brother, his name is Muslim. He came to the classroom. He said to Mr. Seven, "You see this young man, Mr. Jones? I want to take him with me for lunch. Do you object?" He said, "No." Now, legally, that was illegal. My mother didn't even know where I'm going. But it's that brother Muslim. He took me to the masjid. You know what his language was at the masjid? Kindness. He didn't tell me about Islam. When I walked in the masjid, there was and by the way, the masjid was a Jewish synagogue. There was a big synagogue that became a masjid. Inside the masjid was a restaurant. He told me his language was kindness. He said, "Brother, you are my guest. Sit here, eat. Anything you like is on my bill." He told Brother Isa, give him anything he wanted. It's in that restaurant I was sitting that Brother Imam Ayub approached me. But the first demonstration of kindness came from a Muslim when he told me, "You are my guest. Sit here and eat." And he said, "I'll be back." Because he was the principal of the Muslim school, but he was the vice principal of my school. And by law, it was illegal for him to remove me from the school without my mother's permission. And I didn't realize it was getting dark outside. I was like, man, I got to go home. My mom and dad's going to be looking for me. These guys got me in this building. So when I became Muslim, it wasn't, I didn't even know what they was talking about. I just said yes, so I can get out.
That's interesting. Two things that resonate that I want to touch on really quick is when we give da'wah, and I've advised people here, the best form of da'wah that you can give is your own character. Not necessarily convincing people, like Imam said, with thinking that intellectually you're going to convince them. And Allah is the one who turns hearts around. Allah is the one who calls people to the deen of Islam as He wills. He guides whom He wills, and He leaves astray whom He wills. Whenever you see someone with the inclination to become Muslim or to accept Islam, let them accept. The knowledge is something that takes time. And when you spoke about the story of Musa and Harun, that's one of the forms of communication that we spoke about. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, اذهبا إلى فرعون إنه طغى. He tells Musa and Harun, go both of you to Fir'aun to communicate. فقولا له قولا لينا لعله يتذكر أو يخشى. Go and speak a gentle and a kind and a soft word. When you communicate the deen of Islam, first and foremost, it's with your manners. He said he wasn't even paying attention to what was being said. He just knew he wanted the brother to be quiet, but the brother must have came at least with some kind of cordial, respectful tone that was easy for him to at least accept. So that's one point that we always want to take into account, that when we communicate the deen of Islam, speak to people gently, softly, with the proper adab and akhlaq. That is what usually turns people's hearts, more so than you trying to prove something to them from a physical or a astronomical standpoint, just your character. Another point that was really one of the foundations of our last series, the conditions of La ilaha illallah. We talked about the foundation for everything that we learn in Islam. We use a hadith specifically of Abu Abdurrahman, where he says about him and the companions and how they would learn from the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I want you to take note of something that Imam Abdul Malik said when he talked about young Hufaz learning the Quran and how they might know 10 ajza, for example, 10 juz. And you ask them what alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, they don't know. Just like parents. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us and forgive us for our shortcomings. But the hadith of Abu Abdurrahman lets us know how knowledge should be applied. He says, يَقْتَرِئُونَ مِنْ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ عَشْرَ آيَةٍ. That him and the other companions would learn from the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, 10 ayats at a time. فَلَا يَأْخُذُونَ فِي الْعَشْرِ الْأُخْرَى حَتَّى يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي هَذِهِ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ. Who was here last series? مِنَ الْعِلْمِ وَالْعَمَلِ. Thank you, at least one person was here. We talked about this last series. He wouldn't go, or they wouldn't go into the next 10 ayats until they first learn and apply the first 10. Knowledge is application. Google has a lot of information. You want to know any verse of the Quran, you just Google it in, any hadith, just Google. But Google doesn't have any knowledge because knowledge takes application. And that's what Imam was talking about. So as we continue on with our communication, I want you to expand upon how this type of knowledge and communication is lost within our communities, almost to the point where it's very superficial, a surface level. We say niceties, we say nice things, but in our heart, we don't really act as Muslims should act. And that's the same thing with knowledge. We might know or memorize a few hadith or some Quran, but you don't see people living out the hadith and Quran in the way that they act. How does knowledge and communication affect the way that our communities are developing and dealing with each other?
Well, I want to go back to communicational, because if I never see you again, I want you to know the science of communication is in the Quran. Very simple, beautiful verse. Allah said in the Quran, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ. We have never sent a messenger to a people except to speak in, not their language, but their tongue. There's a difference between speaking somebody's language and having the tongue. I can go to China and speak Chinese, but I have the language, but I don't have the tongue. Because to speak in the tongue of the people is to know the language, the culture, and the psychology. See? If I learned Chinese and went to China, they would never mistake me for a Chinaman. No. They said, oh, black guy speaks Chinese. Impressive. So when you talk about the embodiments of your message being reflective in your character, it's in everyday living. Body language. Body language is a means of communication. How you treat people is a reflection of your own mindset. Let me give you an example. One of my greatest fears is for all the people on the internet who have been standing up for Gaza. So many Americans, whites, black, Hispanics, male, female, so many of them have stood up for Gaza. Some have taken their shahada, and they're excited about being Muslim. You know what my fear is for them? When they walk into the masajids and people are cold to them and don't even acknowledge their presence, because they're going to walk in excited. They're Muslim now, they stood up, they're going to walk in and say, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And most people are going to be like, walk past them. That's my fear right now. That for the people who are on all these social media platforms, who are excited about being Muslim, and those who want to come back into the Muslim community, is we lacking in customer service. I told the masajids, we need customer service training. How many of you have ever been to Universal Studio or Disney? You ever been any other places? Raise your hand. How many of you been to Mecca? Raise your hand. Mecca, okay. How many of you have been to a business or hotel or a restaurant where the person gave you good service? You was like, wow, really nice person. You've been there, right? So now, listen very carefully. 85% of all communication is body language. I can walk someplace right now into a lecture, and I can tell by looking at people who is prepared to receive me and who is thinking, who does this guy think he is? What he's going to say? What does he know? Who is he? Huh? Sometimes, you know, I go to big masajids, and people are looking like, for someone like the Mufti, you know, they have the image in their mind of the Imam and the Mufti. I purposely sometimes put the bow tie on. I purposely dress like this sometimes because I know people will judge in the negative, and I want to give them a lesson that some of the best people in the world that are good Muslims, not me, but some of the best Muslims in the world, they don't look like you think they should look, because there is no look of a Muslim. There are modest elements of dress code for male and female, but the true essence of the life of a Muslim, it is the embracing of the principles of Islam and living out the embodiment in your character of what it means to be a good human being. So, when you think of behavior, I watch the youth. Some youth, sometimes they come to the masjid, they have their hat on backwards, they got a Nike shirt on, and somebody grabs him quickly. Brother, it's haram, astaghfirullah. Why are you dressed like kuffar? Brother, what are you talking about? Brother, you know the jinn is on top of the hat. You should turn it forward because, oh, don't turn that hot water on. The jinns are in the faucet. My kids used to come home and tell me things that Muslims say. I say these Muslims are like superstitious Christians. I cannot believe some of the things they say to the youth. But when it comes to communicating, what I want you to consider is this. Just be kind. When you see a new person, an older person, a sister, a brother, don't judge anyone. Just be kind. You know what won the people over in Mecca? To the Prophet ﷺ? Before he got the Quranic revelation, what was the Prophet known for before he got Quran? What was it? Sadaqah, I mean. One that was truthful, and one that was honest. So if we want to be successful with our Islam, it's not just making the 5 prayers and doing Ramadan. That's nice, and making Hajj, that's nice. But if you do all of those rituals, which are important and they are essential, but you have bad character and end up with the people, all that's going to be in vain. If you memorize the Quran and you go home, mashallah, you memorize Quran, you make a salat, you wear hijab, mashallah, you do all those things, and you go home and your mother says, Abdullah, Aisha, do me a favor. I need you to take care of those dishes and take out that garbage. And you go, what? Ain't you a slave? You think this is back home someplace? It's America, I'm free. I don't want to listen to you. You do that? What is your prayers worth then? What is your salat? What is this hijab? What is all this for? Character. The essence of character is extremely important because there are many people. The Quran gives the parable. Allah says in the Quran, they are men and women of knowledge. They're like the donkey. I like to use the other word, but I won't. It's the masjid. But the donkey, that donkey, the jack, you know, the donkey. Allah says they're like donkeys with books on their back. Just imagine, I want you to imagine, because Allah is painting a picture. You see a donkey, and on the back of the donkey is books. You never think that this donkey has read those books. You never think those books, no matter how valuable they are, you'll never think those books benefited the donkey, because they benefit the donkey not. In fact, the donkey is not even aware what he's carrying. Some of us are like that. We have the Quran, we don't know what it is. That's why it's always left on the shelf until Ramadan. If we knew what was in the Quran, we would pick up the Quran like we pick up the iPhone and the Android to check email and social media. Because there's a great book I want you to read. It's called Stolen Focus. What is it called?
Stolen Focus.
Stolen Focus. The average person who is a scroller, because scrolling, it has a chemical addictive capacity to lock in your brain. The average person will scroll 250,000 hours of their life away. The scrolling used to be stopped, and you would have to say more. Now it's endless. I have gone to Salatul Jum'ah. In the Jum'ah, I see people on their phone. SubhanAllah. You come to the Jum'ah prayer and you don't put the phone down, shut it off. If you come to Salah, or you come for an Islamic event, and you want to be attentive, shut it off. I give you one piece of communication. If you ever want to communicate with people, look at this hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. You know this hadith where the Prophet spoke to Ibn Abbas. This is one of the wisdom of communicating. He said, Ya ghulam, Allah u'allimuka kalimatan. Oh young man, should I teach you some words of wisdom? Why is the Prophet asking for permission? He's the messenger of Allah. He could say to Ibn Abbas, come over here, sit down, I gotta tell you something. You better listen. This is divine revelation. This can save your soul. No, the Prophet is wise. When he says, Ya ghulam, yeah, that, he gets his attention. May I have your permission to teach you words of wisdom? Yes. What did the Prophet establish by asking him that? He got his attention. When you teach someone, if you don't have their attention, then whatever you're saying doesn't mean anything. So when we talk about character, we talk about communication, communicating is not only with words, it's with your conduct, it's with your demeanor. I tell people, young people, if you want to be successful, you have to think like a champion. You have to walk like a champion. You have to talk like a champion before you can be a winner. We're all born to win by Allah's grace. But some people, I see them, they walk like this. I'm telling you communication. Somebody walks in, say, Assalamu alaikum. Walaikum salam. How you doing? I'm good, mashallah. How's everything going, brother? Everything's okay. What happened, brother? You know, I was trying to get married, but it seems like no sister seems to pay me any attention. And I guess I'll just die lonely. How old are you, brother? I'm just 21. I got a good job, and I finished college, and I did all the right things, but just can't get no one to consider me. Poor me. No, there's no one to like that. Like the brother was different. Say, Assalamu alaikum, walaikum salam. I'm like, doing great, brother. How's everything, man? Everything is beautiful by Allah's grace. What you doing today? Oh, brother, there's a few things I got on the calendar right now, but we got some amazing things going on. We're planning for a bright future. Are you married? No, brother, but guess what? I got my eyes on her, so you need to sit down right now, because I see you looking at her too. She's already taken in my mind. It's different. No, brothers, pretend the ladies are not here. I want to give all you brothers a warning. Women do not like, nor are they attracted to weak men. And religion doesn't help you if religion that you think makes you weak. If your religious conviction makes you think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to send you a woman out of the sky and miraculously she's going to knock on your door, you're going to die lonely and sad. When you're looking to get married, you got work to do as young men. It's called preparation. And the women will know, the mothers will know, the fathers will know. When they look at you, they say, this is the young man I'm looking for. I want this young man right here for my daughter. He's disciplined, he's responsible, he's kind, he's ambitious, he's financially stable, and he's a warrior, knowing if I die, my daughters and my grandchildren will be protected. And you brothers of the next generation, be strong. Be strong. We need to communicate that to young men. Because I see too many soft boys in the community. They're too soft. They need discipline and guidance and inspiration. And they need to hold their heads up very high. Not to take too much of your time.
As much as you can. These are jewels, these are gems. I hope you are taking at least mental notes, if not actually writing some of this down. MashaAllah. I just want to show Imam Abdul Malik, he's been touching on some things that we've already went over in class. So I we're going to give a good test just to show him what we've been talking about. In the first series, I want you to tell him what my grandmother used to tell me. Because if you knew better,
You do better.
you do better. If you knew better,
You do better.
so knowledge is only as good as its application.
And
Customer service in the masjid, I've never heard those two words put together, me personally. But I think that's a note that we all need to take heed of. We need to have like some type of customer service response or suggestion. We've actually suggested that we have a suggestion box and a customer service fill out form to see what type of, should be 5-star. Customer service in the masjid is very important. And to put those two words together, it might seem small, but I really took note of that. And I want to push that forward to our leadership within the masjid, that we should work on our customer service. Because so many people are coming into the masjid having these high hopes and high expectations to be then let down as soon as they walk through the door. Why? Because Muslims are not behaving like Muslims. Allah asked us a rhetorical question in the Quran. He says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, O you who believe, lima taquluna ma la taf'alun. Why do you say that which you don't do? Why do you say that which you don't do? Communication can only take you to one point as far as verbal communication. Your actions is what leaves a more lasting impression on somebody rather than your words. You can say a bunch of stuff, but if you show somebody, that means a lot more than just talking about it. Talk to talk, but you still got to walk the walk. But the person who walks the walk, they don't have to talk so much. Why? Because their body language, understand? Body language. Your body has a language. Your body language speaks louder than your body's voice, than your mouth. So let your example be one of somebody who communicates better with their actions, and then their words back up their action, rather than somebody who talks a lot but then leaves people wishing and wanting more from your actual actions. So take note of that. be the person that you want to see. Have mercy on people as you want mercy. The Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir, none of you truly believes in the hereafter, فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ, or whoever believes in Allah in the hereafter, let us speak good or keep silent. So belief in Allah and the Day of Judgment is directly tied to the way that you communicate. If you don't have nothing good to say, then just be quiet. And that's what one of his early teachers' example was. There's going to be no backbiting, not going to be no slander. Only goodness when we speak to one another. Only goodness. And that's the divide that you see in our communities. So much of the time, we're talking about each other instead of to each other. We're tearing down the bridges of communication instead of building them. And we see that within our own DFW community. Not oftentimes do we reach out to other masajids. And I was talking to somebody about this earlier today. And this is the next question I'm going to lead you to, Imam. I was talking to somebody earlier today about setting up programs within each masjid community. And so many are disappointed. Why doesn't this masjid have a program with this masjid? Why is it so difficult for this imam to come and do a talk at this masjid? What is this political nonsense that we're playing within our community? And I can give you examples of that from my own personal life, but I'll spare some people. I reached out to a lot of people, mashallah, but one of the things that I noticed, and I'm going to praise you if you don't mind, and all praise is due to Allah, but I want to appreciate good when I see it. When I reached out to Imam Abdullah, and this is a true story, I said, Imam, I know you're busy, because this is how Imam politics work. I'm going to let you inside on some Imam politics. You reach out to an Imam, you want to respect him and respect his time. So you say, let me speak to your scheduler. You know, every imam has a scheduler. You don't talk to them directly. They're very busy. You got to email them. You got to go to the secretary. You got to speak to the scheduler. So I came the same way with Imam Malik. I know he's very busy. He must have a lot of speaking engagements everywhere. I said, let me speak to your scheduler because I don't want to overburden you. And he was low-key offended. He said, brother, what are you talking about? I said, no. Talk to me directly. Because I was so used to this type of political jargon that we do as imams in communities. It's so hard to get in touch with your brother and your sister in faith. And the Prophet ﷺ used to make people get an appointment and contact this person and that. No, you could come to him directly if you needed him. But our imams and our leadership of our communities and masajids to work with one another, there's a whole application you got to fill out, and there's some time you got to take, and you got to meet with this person, and to get something approved, you got to go through that person. But the example of appropriate communication is when your brother calls on you, for you to respond to your brother or your sister. And I want Imam Abdullah to really expound upon that point and some advice we give our communities going forward. How do we remove these self-imposed restrictions between imams, between communities, to have all of this red tape? How do we, what's a strategy? I know you can just say, yeah, just don't do it, but what's a strategy we can use to really develop bridges in our community that can easily be crossed back and forth, and we can reach out and get responses from our community? What's your advice as far as that is concerned?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First, brothers and sisters who have some popularity or position of power, you have to pray that Allah keeps them humble. Because we're nothing at the end of the day. I'm 58. I'm closer to the graveyard than I've ever been. In a few years, if I get 20 or 30 more years, maybe 50, I don't know. But at some point, I'm going to the graveyard. What happens is that when you become popular and you draw crowds, Shaitan can make you arrogant. People ask me sometimes, what can I introduce you? Like, I want to introduce you. Most people, I don't give them no resume, no introduction, nothing. I say, just say Brother Abdullah and that's it, let's go. Why? First, there's a level of confidence that I have that I will deliver a message and I will be effective by Allah's grace, and that will be sufficient. Sometimes when people get popular and they get influence, they get surrounded by handlers. See, you have to know sometimes. If you're a good speaker or a good qari or a good imam, There are people that play politics with you and you don't know they're moving you. I'll give you an example. One time I went to give a speech. And as soon as I finished the speech, out of nowhere, these guys surrounded me and took me out the back door. I was trying to figure out what's going on. Like, I wanted to stay for the lecture. I wanted to meet all the brothers and sisters. The audience was packed, maybe 600-700 people. I wanted to talk to everybody and shake their hand and eat with people. They zoomed me right out. I'm like, what's this for? I'm not Michael Jackson. I'm not J. Cole. I'm not some big celebrity. We are all just Muslims. That's it. We're just human beings. Now, if you are a leader and you need security because there's a threat, I understand that. The Imam of the Haram needs security because tens of thousands of people want to pull on him. But it's on the brother and sister who has been blessed by Allah with some influence. It's up to them to stay humble, like stay really humble. Like you gotta stay humble. If Allah gives you success, you must stay humble. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you have to study human nature. There's a great book I want you to read. It's called The Laws of Human Nature. And it's not just about understanding the nature of other people, but it's understanding your own nature. The greatest struggle of the human being is to avoid the spirit of vanity. The Prophet ﷺ said the thing he feared for the Ummah most of all was what? Shirk al-riyah, to do things to be seen of people. So each individual person has to work on themselves to be humble. And there's really nothing you can do externally to make a person humble. I've had brothers, I greet them and say, Salaam alaikum. They say, oh, you don't say Salaam alaikum. You say Salaam alaikum, Dr. Muhammad. I said, brother, I've known you for like 40 years. He said, I don't care. It's Dr. Muhammad. I said, okay. If doctor is better than me just saying Muhammad, may Allah save you from such foolish thinking, right? Now, if he is a doctor, I respect his title. I can say Dr. Muhammad, Dr. Aisha, out of respect on my own initiative. But you don't impose upon someone to insist that they call you anything spectacular. Now, what I would say to this generation is leave the old politics alone. The old heads, let us die off, okay? Focus on your generation of building a bridge of mutual respect and understanding amongst yourself and embody the discipline and the character of a young Muslim. What do I mean by that? I've seen Muslim youth in the masjid bullying each other, and I don't like it. I don't like what I see with the Muslim youth in some of the schools. Some of them, they are bullying other Muslim kids, and they're putting them in a state of depression and anxiety, and they're forcing them to become suicidal. We have to teach a whole lesson to young men and women that are growing up in America, what it means, number one, to be a Muslim. Number two, to be humble. Number three, to be a vessel of goodness, not only in the Muslim community, but for the whole of humanity. We are the guardians of the light. We are the guardians of truth, justice, and equality. We are the keepers of justice. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us a very special, noble position if we embody that. And so I say to you that, when you reach out to people, if they're playing like hard to reach, leave them be. Find someone else that you can reach. I have people right now, I can call them on their cell phone, and they'll pick up. I do fundraising for people. They pick up every time I call them when I'm coming to their fundraiser. But after the fundraiser, I call them and text them, and they don't answer until they need another fundraiser. I have people like that. I've dealt with them. When they want me to fundraise, oh man, they're calling me, Brother Abdul Malik, Sheikh Abdul Malik, Imam Abdul Malik. You go there, they put you, mashallah, they greet you in the mosque, they take you in the office, they give you a great reception. Oh, you're at the hotel, everything is beautiful. But when the fundraising is over, they don't even say bye to you. Or Assalamu alaikum, or take you to the car, or say, no, I'm just telling you human nature. So I don't do it for them, so I don't worry about their behavior, because I go there with a mission. So what I say to you is that if you're looking for a bridge in the Muslim community, know for sure, just be that bridge. You be the bridge. You visit the masajid. You visit other people. You visit the youth. You support other people. And in you showing them a demonstration of your kindness and your outreach, those who reciprocate, you have unity amongst yourselves. But I say to the young people that are here, find a few elders in the community that love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that fear Allah, that will invest in you as young people becoming the next leaders, not just of the masajid, but leaders of America. Because you were born, designed, and engineered by Allah for greatness. You did not come into this world for failure. And you didn't come into this world just to be leaders and work together in the masjid. No, you are the leaders and the future leaders of America. And you need leadership classes and programs that give you a blueprint of empowerment to go out there in the real world where people are playing real politics. Leave the masjid politics alone. Go out there in the real world. Become America's governors. Become the senators. Become the congresspeople. Become the judges. Become the police force. Become the head of agencies. Because then and only then will you impact America and make it easier for brothers and sisters overseas. You are the bridge. Don't look for the older people. They're already in a certain mindset. Leave them alone. I got that from a friend, Dr. Anissa. She warned me many, many years ago. She said, I'm dramatic. I was in Orlando, Florida. She said, you want to be successful? Leave the elders alone. They have their own mind, their own politics, their own ethnic little games. Leave them. But work on the young people. Those young people I work with, now they are in their 30s and 40s, and they have children, and they're married, and they're successful Muslims, alhamdulillah. So build a bridge. You have to build a bridge. You sit down. You design the blueprint. Leave the older people alone, and stay away from masjid politics. Masjid politics is sickening. Maybe this masjid won't let me come back. The idea that someone will run for the office in a masjid and we got to fight and vote and bicker, and then some people are in their homes with their little ethnic little groups, and they're speaking their own language, and they're plotting. This brother comes to the masjid, he should be the president. This brother never comes to the masjid, but he got more people from his country that's going to vote for him, and they're going to play corruption. Like, what kind of success you hope for doing that? I was in one masjid, I spoke about Palestine, and the Muslims told me, don't tell anyone I'm not able to vote for, because you're going to make us lose our 501c3. I said, you're just a bunch of chickens. You should lose it. If you think the government of America is worried about you, and these little masjids are going to take your little 501c3 from you because you spoke about politics. Every politician goes to the church, they go to the synagogue, they go to the Wailing Wall. What are you afraid of? So I told the Muslims, you don't know who to vote for? Good. I'm going to tell you who you cannot vote for. Anyone that is an elected official that has the genocide blood on their hands of the Palestinians, you should fear Allah and never give them your vote. And don't worry about who comes after them. Because we're not afraid of Donald Trump. We're not afraid of him. He's a man that will live and die. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control of his destiny. We're not worried about who's in charge in the White House. We're worried about who's in charge in our house. And Allah is the supreme authority. And if you want to be successful in America, I'm warning you right now. You will never be successful in America being a scared Muslim. You have to have the courage of people like Muhammad Ali, the courage of a Malcolm X. You have to have the courage of Sahaba when they dealt with the Kuffar of Mecca and they dealt with the Quraysh. You have to have courage, unshakable courage and conviction. It's not about being violent. It's about knowing your true value. You are special people with unlimited opportunities in America to pursue greatness. But you have to make up your mind that you want to be impactful and stop wasting your time with games, sport, and play. It's okay to play sometime, but you young brothers and sisters, you should be someplace with your head in the books of history, the Quran, the Hadith, and books of history of leadership and rulership, and you should figure out how do you create a future for unborn generations to be empowered.
Allahu Akbar.
That's, oof. See where I get some of that Bible speech from, mashallah. I just want to say on behalf of our board and our leadership that inshallah we will invite you back and
We're after tonight. After you see this video.
I must know. Our leadership is here, mashallah.
Thank you.
I must say on behalf of our leadership that this has been a board that I have found to be very accommodating, very brave, very courageous, very open to ideas, and we're in the transition phase. Just so you know about this community is in the transition phase, where the old board or the old establishment is out, and they have to go through a court process, mashallah. And Allah rectified the situation for the new leadership of this community. And we just had elections, and now we have a board of trustees, and we have a masjid committee as well. And so we are turning a leaf. And as we come into this new year, we need to take time to reflect upon where we came from and how we can improve so we can get to where we all want to go, which is Jannatul Firdaus. And the only way we can do that is if we learn from the past mistakes that we made, and we take advantage of the opportunities that we currently have. Living in the moment of each and every opportunity that we have. Imam Abdul Malik, mashallah, he made some great points. We can't be scared. We can't be afraid. We can't be 1 foot in, 1 foot out Muslims. We have to be Muslims every single second of our lives and rule by the book of Allah. Huwa al-Furqan. The Kitab of Allah, the book of Allah, that is the criterion which makes decisions for us. The book of Allah and the guidance of His beloved, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the differentiating factor for a Muslim. That's what we go off of. That is our standard. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The most noble of you are those who have the most taqwa, the most fear of Allah. So for the next generation coming up, yeah, forget about the old. Forget about the old. But I'm going to combat that a little bit. The wisdom of the elders mixed with the energy of the youth makes a successful community. Yes. The wisdom of the elders mixed with the energy of the youth, that is what develops a successful community. We need your energy. We need you to put away the bad social, cultural lessons that you learn from the old heads, and everybody has their baggage. Put that to the side. This whole cultural, ethnic, race, this nonsense needs to be left in the past. And my father told me this when I was young. He said, you know, these foreigners, right? They think about it differently in different times, right? So when my father had become a Muslim, and Abdul Malik was probably a young man, immigrants had started to come to America with Islam. Not only with Islam, but also with their cultural ideas of what Islam was. And trying to superimpose that onto what Islam is. Islam came to perfect culture, not the other way around. Islam doesn't necessarily have to fit in your culture has to fit into Islam. And so my father would tell me, you know, in this generation, you might not see one of our Muslim brothers marrying their daughters to you or our sons, meaning African American, indigenous Muslims in America. You might not see that so much back, let's say 20, 30 years ago. But he said, you know, a generation or two from now, all of these kids are just going to be American. Their kids are going to be just as American as you are. And they're going to face some of the same trials and tribulations, some of the same peer pressures, some of the same streets, the influence and the violence. They're going to face some of the same struggles that you're facing. And then there's going to be a reality that we all have to deal with. How do we become better as Muslim Americans without the baggage of our cultures or our ethnicities or the countries where we came from? One day, all of us are just going to be Muslims in America. And the divide between cultures, between races, between ethnicities is going to be lost. And that's the job of this next generation, to do away with that divide. We are all Muslim brothers and sisters of one another, regardless of where our parents came from. And some of you are second and third generation, born right here in America. And that's, I think, the allure of the way that somebody like Imam Abdul Malik speaks, or the way that I might speak to some of you. And that's the reason why your parents have chosen me to be someone who is the leader or director of the youth here, is because there's a certain communication and understanding we have with one another, the same experiences that we have. And so as Imam Abdul Malik just mentioned, you be the bridge. The next generation, be that bridge. Be that bridge that bridges the gap. The gap that we have in our communities mostly is due to our ethnic differences. We speak different language, we like different, somebody like biryani, other people like jollof, and so on and so forth. And that's what you see with the old heads. But as we grow in Islam, as we develop the future leaders of Islam in America, you do away with that old way of thinking. And you make the priority be people who have taqwa. That's who is the best amongst us, is the one who has the most God consciousness and fear of Allah. So Imam, I want to maybe try to close out with a final question. regarding your experience in Mecca and what you took back from living there for so many years and studying at the University of Mecca. How, and you answered this to a certain respect, but I'm going to spin it a little bit different. How can we, as the next generation of Muslims, build our communities and our families in a way that will see us be successful considering the society that we live in? For example, tonight is New Year's Eve, and there's some pushback. Should we have an event on New Year's Eve? Is that celebrate? I know this is a hard-hitting question. Are we celebrating New Year's Eve? It's also the first of Rajab. As American Muslims growing up in this society, right? And I preach this to my people. We have to develop homegrown scholarship because the situations that we're dealing with other people don't have an idea of. How do we combat our social condition with Islam here in America to develop and forge better communities? Now, the youth are going to take it to the next level, to the future. How do they build that bridge considering where we live and the socio-economic conditions that we live in?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The first thing I would recommend is know what's important first. If I go to a doctor and I have cancer, but I also have a little needle that poked me in my ear, and I have a little drop of blood, I'm not going to focus on my ear with the doctor. I'm going to focus on my cancer. I think we have to get focused. Focus. I want to come to what you just said. It is a new year, and everyone will be affected by the new year. Your phones will change. When you go to the bank, you will have to do things differently. When you book a flight, this is reality. Like, New Year's in America is not a holiday. It's not a religious holiday. Like, if people want to say Happy New Year's, what's the big deal? There's a New Year's in Saudi Arabia. There's a New Year's in Pakistan. There's National Day. People got all kind of social events they do. Just because people hold these social events doesn't mean it's religion. It's not religion. It's just a new year. It's a big deal. It's a new year. We're not going to drink and smoke, but if people want to have family over in their home and they want to just, it's a new year for them, leave them alone. Like, we got bigger things. Right now, Gaza should be our conversation, for example, if you want to debate an issue. But I think that you have to understand something, brothers and sisters. This is why studying Islamic history is important. You have to know what impacts Islam. The Islamic experience is not limited to what you read in the Quran and the life teaching of the Prophet. It's also an extension of other people's cultural norms and traditions. Let me give you an example. Was Prophet Muhammad ever married before he got revelation? Yes. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. When the Prophet became the messenger of Allah, did him and the Khadija have a new wedding? No, right? So that means that the wedding they had in Jahiliyyah was a marriage that's legitimate in Islam. Why? Because the nature of marriage is more cultural than it is religious. The way marriages are done, it's all cultural. The religious aspect is Allah has set forth in motion. If a man or a woman wants to come together, it's done in a manner where there is a sense of commitment to fidelity in the name of Allah for the institution of marriage. But how that marriage is done or celebrated or organized is a reflection of culture. I lived in Mecca, right? A guy gets married to a girl. He pays the dowry and everything. He doesn't even link with the girl the night he marries her. He got to go furnish the apartment. That's another 6 months of savings. Then he's already married to her. He can take her out publicly to a coffee shop. He can sit with her in a restaurant, but he cannot take her anywhere privately until he furnishes the apartment. Islamically, he can take her wherever he wants once he's done the nikah. But the cultural dynamics kicks in, and they have their own system. And some of us in America, we adopt other people's systems, and we assume that it's Islam. We have to separate cultural norms and traditions from Islamic requirements. That's one. Second thing, Muslims in America will develop a cultural Islamic identity that is foreign to any foreign nation overseas. Why? Because we're a byproduct of the environment that we live in. You are always a byproduct of the environment. And I tell Muslim parents, if you don't want your children being Americanized, you should have never came here. Because when you come to America, this is a cultural phenomena of its own, and not just that. America's culture is so strong. I was in Tunis, I was in Mecca, and you heard Biggie Smalls, Tupac Shakur, all the raps, and you walk around and young Arabs are saying to each other, yo, nigga, what's up, nigga? Oh, nigga, what? And now it's in the masajid. I see the young brothers, you go to the Islamic convention, they're like, yo, what's up, my nigga? Where you going, nigga? I'm like, come over here. Where you from? Where your parents from? Pakistan. Where your parents from? Egypt. I said, they make niggas now, Pakistan and Egypt? Yeah, niggas from Pakistan and Egypt. But what it is, it's the schools you go to, it's the music, it's the culture. It's a culture of darkness, right? But also some children have heard their own parents speak negative about black people. The only people on the planet Earth that call black people slaves is the Muslim community. I've been in Muslim countries where they literally call a black person slave. I've never heard that in America. I never heard people, and I'm saying it's part of the culture now. I'm not going to bring up any nationality. You know if it's in your home, you know if it's in your culture. So now I want to go to my experience in Mecca. Mecca taught me something that was not written in any book. When I was in Mecca, I had a perfect opportunity to observe. These eyes are powerful. What I noticed in Mecca was people are different. And you know the people are different in their cultural attire, and their cultural attire and their language is a reflection of their origin. Even if they're all Arabs. The Saudis don't dress like the Kuwaitis. The Kuwaitis don't dress like the people of Bahrain. The Bahraini does not dress like the people of Amman. The people of Amman do not dress like the people of Syria. The people of Egypt don't dress like the Sudanese. The Nigerians don't dress like the people of Ghana. Allah says in the Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahim, يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم. Oh people, I have made you into what? From one single essence, from male and female. Look what Allah says. I made you into nations and to tribes. I want you to stop right there. The objective of Islam is not to erase your cultural identity and we all become a melting pot. That's not Islam's objective. Allah makes it clear, I made you to nations and to tribes. Now I'm going to give you a history lesson that you need to go study. Because you Muslims in America, you are now walking in the same footsteps. You need to go and study the history of the making of a slave. Because the making of a slave requires, number one, that you take away their memory of self-identity. You take away the language, you take away the culture, you take away the religion, and you take away the essence of them recognizing their own humanity. And you turn them into niggas. Because the nigga is a product of America's experience between black and white. And it's a scientific experiment. Because what they did with blacks in America, they did the same thing in the Muslim world, Africa and Asia. There are books you gotta read, The Colonization of Africa and Asia, written by UNESCO, United Nations Cultural Educational Organization. How they colonized the Muslim world, the British, the French, the Portuguese, the Italians, and the Spaniards, how they colonized the minds of the Muslims. And in America, when you're dealing with elite Muslims, you're dealing with the children of a colonized mind. That's why when they have meetings, they say, Robin rules of order. What's Robin got to do with the masjid? I second the motion. How do you do it? I second that. And when you go to Muslim countries and African nations, look, right now, African nations that were colonized by the French, they paid $500 billion a year to the French government for colonization fees. Did you know that? You know, all African countries, the majority of them, all their money is printed by the European nations. Their money stays in Europe. Right now, in the French African nations that were colonized, if the Africans right now find gold, silver, oil, or diamonds. They can't touch it. France has the right of refusal. They must get permission from the French. Would you believe that? That in 2025, coming up, that an African country would need the French permission for the goods they found. So in Mecca, what did I see? I saw the beauty of Islam. People making tawaf, allowed to be themselves. I knew people were from Pakistan by the way they were dressed. I knew people were from India. I knew the difference between India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. And I knew the difference from the Indians that from South Africa, who are South Africans, but who originally came from India because they have a different dress code. So dress code is a language. It speaks a language. So in America, the Muslim community will be diverse. We'll be different from Texas than we are from New York. New York would be different from the Muslims in Virginia. We are part of the byproduct of the environment in which we live, but it's up to us to shape and mold an Islamic identity that is consistent with the Quran. But we don't need to impose our way on others, and we don't want others imposing their ways upon us. If a person becomes Muslim tomorrow, they don't have to change their name. I did. But you don't have to change your name to be a Muslim. You don't have to change your dress code. I don't have to become a Muslim and dress like somebody from overseas. That's not a requirement. I don't have to eat their food. I don't have to live like they live. And my women don't have to dress like their women. I'm entitled to be myself based upon what Allah has gifted me with. I must maintain an identity of self, because in that identity of self is the worshiping, the glorification of Allah, that I am who Allah intended for me to be, as opposed to trying to be someone that I'm not. And I'm going to end with this point. In Mecca, I saw the impact of the government on religion. Governments are very powerful. They use religion as a tool to manipulate the masses and to control the minds of the people. And then I saw the cultural influence, and then I saw the power of money. Money. That money is powerful. And then I saw something that I committed to myself to fight against. I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm done. I'm going to leave it at this point. Every man is born of a woman, true or not?
True.
Yes or no?
Yes.
With the exception of one, right? But every man is born of a woman, right? Except Adam, right? Yes or no?
Yes.
The greatest prophets, born of a woman?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Isa, born of a woman. Moses, born of a woman. Abraham, Prophet Muhammad, were all born of a woman, right? So, if every man is born of a woman, it means that before you even get a chance to touch down on the planet Earth, Allah has to choose for you a mother that will give birth unto you and risk her life for you to come into existence. With that kind of knowledge, how is it that in many places Muslim women are treated as second class? How is that? How is it that Khadija radiallahu anha is the first amongst women to believe, the first to protect